For a moment in time, just the other night at a teen girls' conference, a room of about 10 girls who some had never met, were more trusting than ever before. We looked one another in the eye, we cried, and we said words that had mostly never been said. It was the night that we shared life stories. I may not remember all of those girls' names, and they may not remember mine. But because of our transparency, because we weren't afraid of being judged, and were therefore more honest than ever, I will remember those girls' faces and their stories. When I'll see them at school, I'll be able to ask them, "How are you?" And they'll be able to give me an honest answer. And when I'm asked the same question, I'll be able to truthfully respond. Their stories, individually and as a whole, have changed the perspective I have on my life. I thought that my life had been pretty rough, and I'll admit, I know that it still is. But after hearing them speak, I know that my life is no harder. They, too, are struggling with things that I will never understand. Things that only Christ could. When we first sat down in the room, which was by the end of the night known as the life story room or the crying room, we were cuddled with our pillows and our blankets, and I thought for sure that at least one of us would have a life story with few trials, a life that was just a breeze. But as story after story came and went, my heart sank as I realized how little I knew and how little I still know. I have no fear that any of us will gossip about what was said that night, because God was present. Each of us had a job that going into it we didn't know we would fulfill. Some were comforters, quick to stand up and walk across the room to give a hug to the person who was crying while telling their stories. Others were the ones who would crack a joke to lighten our spirits. A few were meant to break down social stigmas and stereotypes, while some spoke mainly through singing. And all together that night, we added up to one body of Christ. In that room, we were more like Christ than ever before. We made a difference in all of our lives. Wounds were reopened for each one of us, but this time, it was different. There was a mustard seed, a tiny, tiny little seed, planted in all of us that night. And as we go about our lives, we'll slowly forget the little details, and maybe even the big ones, about that night. We'll sin again, and I'm sure we will gossip about things that we hear, even though we know we hear these things falsely. But a seed was indeed planted, a seed of healing that can't be taken away. Life will in fact get better. We saw that through our timelines. And even though many of us are facing struggles right now, struggles that bring us to tears and break us down many times, we know that God is near and that He will never leave us, even when we abandon Him. To all of my girls, I love you. Your stories have changed me. And to everyone that wasn't there, which was most of the world, I urge you to open your hearts and your ears larger than ever and listen without judgment to a story you've never thought could be filled with so much struggle. Be the light of the world to someone, because you might really be the only Jesus that someone will ever meet.